My name is Insane Raven, and I'm back with another episode of IO Reviews. On this episode, The Kid That Would Be King. Note to future Raven, if you ever want to do another King Arthur movie again, don't. Good talk. Alright, so, based off that I think that this movie is terrible. It's not. It is a decent movie. It is a forgettable movie that tells you so much more than it ever shows you. But it is not a bad movie. Some of there are two characters who are a lot of fun, actually. One character that's completely wasted, and two characters that you just kind of have to agree exist. And none of those characters are the characters you want to have those roles. So you have Lance and Kay, who are supposed to be the bully characters, and all these characters that you're not supposed to necessarily like at first, but you kind of get to like as they become allies of the Force, and all this other jazz. And all this other jazz that kind of ends up going on throughout the movie. And when they first get introduced, they are pushing over our homeboy Betters, who could not be any more annoying as a character or as a human being that I wanted to bully him. Like, just straight up, I wanted to bully him. Like, everything about him was like, no, I understand why you're being bullied. 100%, I get it. Like, fuck you. And I feel like that's a little bit unfair, because at the end of the day, he's just this kid who wants to follow his passions and wants to do things that he's passionate about, and he's a bit of a dork, and that's okay. And it should be okay to be okay and do those kind of things, But everything about him is just annoying and nasally and purposely designed to be punchable that I can't blame the bullies. And that might make me a terrible person, but I really don't care. Like, he is the most punchable character in a movie I think I've seen in a long time. He's very punchable. I don't know what to tell you. He's very punchable. So you're going on, and basically the story is you're still in a King Arthur movie. Person finds, in this case, boy, because he's the kid. Kid finds stone in stone, sword and stone. Kid saves it, and then goes on whimsical, wild adventure to save the world, and it's all fun and dandy. The art is given. I think his name is Art, something like that. It's some stupid play off the word Arthur. But, because his name isn't Arthur, but it's like a play off the word Arthur, whatever. That's the other thing. This movie really likes its puns with its names and characters and whatever. Because almost all of them are name and or pun. Which is just okay. You Do You, I guess, movie. But, he ends up finding this stone after a rough day of getting bullied and being chased by his bullies, because that's how all these movies start. That's how all these movies start, with the kid having a rough day at school and losing all hope and saying that nothing matters and life doesn't matter, and that's why nothing will ever get better, because nothing matters. Children's entertainment. So, with that being our backdrop for the movie, what happens? Well, a mystical, magical being called Martin, or Martin, depending on how you want to pronounce it, shows up as the new kid at school after the stone has been found and recovered. And you find out that, well, the world's gonna die in 4 days because an evil spirit demon lady called Morgana, which every time I heard the name, couldn't help but think of the cat from Persona 5. Decides to show up and like makes a claim for her land. And this kid is the only thing stopping from hell on earth coming. Which, you know, children's entertainment. We have fun here. And then, what the fuck is this? I don't know. So as the movie goes on, whimsy and magical adventures continue, and it's just a good time. It's a good adventure to go on, wholesome even, as our main character goes through lies, successes, failures, and pretty much all just the usual happy-go-lucky things that you would expect to find on this adventure. So there's that. I chose to see this movie instead of Serenity because of Patrick Stewart. I love Patrick Stewart. I think that I rarely see a movie that he's in that I don't like or have a problem with. And that's part of the reason why I chose this movie. This movie is going to make me rethink that, because he is completely and utterly wasted in this movie. To the point where it's really frustrating to see him in this, and just to kind of see him as more of a crux and more of a hindrance to the plot than anything else. You know, he's in this movie hanging out and being like, no, look at all these things that I can do. And these are the things that I have to explain. But every time he shows up, he ends up being this exposition-heavy, plot-dragging down character who, unfortunately, is completely unnecessary, because we already have an exposition-heavy plot device in the movie, in the storybook that the main character is given. So it's just like, you have these characters that you're supposed to be rooting for, but instead, you genuinely just get why he wants to get punched, why the people want to punch him in the face. This main character, who is boring and kind of just there as your standard hero. These two bully characters who are way more fascinating and much more interesting. And an overall plot that's like, well, let me tell you why everything's happening. And then shows you that all that stuff I just told you. And then expects you to be wowed and amazed. All while wasting Sir Patrick Stewart. How do you waste an actual knight in your movie about knights? What? The movie makes a lot of weird and bad decisions throughout the film, and that's what I'm really trying to get across. It has a great premise. Hell, I was really excited about the premise. Not so much about it all being children, but about the premise of the King Arthur story in modern day times. That's exciting. I wanted to see how they took that and where they were going to go from it. Instead, it ends up being not worth your time. At all. Unfortunate. So, with all that being said, totally forgot that my headset was still in. With all that being said, do I recommend the movie? Not really. At the end of the day, it's a different take on a plot that's almost been done too many times for its own good at this point. Well, I don't even think you can surprise audiences with a King Arthur tale anymore. And while it does try new things for the genre, it doesn't end up being anything that you want to see. Or anything that you care to see. And what I do want to say this here, the best character in this movie is 1000% K. Lady K is easily the best character in this movie. She's told to be this shallow, almost narcissistic character, but then is given the deepest and most well thought out lines. She's this character who, while everyone else is like almost too much of an archetype, she's over here like, look, I'm a bad person, but that was kind of fucked up, don't you think? Obviously they don't cuss because they keep that PG-13 rating, and they try to keep it safe for the kiddos. But it's definitely the vibe that you get coming off the film. And it's a shame. If they had given any of the other characters half as much thought as they gave Kay, I would have enjoyed the movie a lot more. Even Lance ends up being way too much of an archetype than an actual character at times, going against just good judgment. There's a part of the movie where like they end up fighting, this isn't a spoiler, it's like whatever. He ends up being this character where about halfway through the movie they end up fighting these fire-ass creatures that you've seen at this point 2 other times. And after being given a sword, he decides no, he wants to be King Arthur and he wants to have the sword and everything that comes with. Even though he has seen that only one person can be King Arthur, and he has seen that all this is real and it's not just something that these two, for all intents and purposes, dorks are making up as they kind of go along. It's real. It's concrete. So therefore the rules should be real and concrete, but they're not. At least not to him. And he ends up doing some pretty dumbass moves because of it. And then ends up just feeling like extra padding into a movie that's already 2 hours long when it doesn't need to be. With how much the movie tells you is going to happen, you could almost cut this movie down by a good half an hour and still be fine. But I'm going to leave some of the other complaints that I have about the movie, and arguably some of my biggest complaints about the movie, in the spoiler section of this video. So if you want to know more about it, I'll talk about it there. But all in all, it's not a movie worth your time, and it's not something that I would recommend seeing. Now, if you absolutely love the King Arthur story and you want to see a different portrayal of it, you're going to see this movie regardless. And in this something worth seeing of a modern interpretation of it. Unfortunately, it's not as intelligent or as inventive as I wish it could have been. Which in the end is probably its biggest failing. That instead of being well thought out all the way through, it ends up being half-baked. And in a movie where you can't really afford to be anything less than amazing, since being that we've heard this story so many times as is, half-baked anything isn't going to make it. It's not going to cut it here. And unfortunately, that's what we got. But that's all I got for this video. If you guys want to hear more spoilery things, stay tuned. But I'm going to head into spoiler section. If you guys have seen The Kid Who Would Be King, let me know what you thought about it in the comment section down below. Who is your favorite character? What movie do you want to see me cover next time? And I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye. And I'm dead. So, if you guys are still here, you want to hear spoilers, and you don't give a shit about this movie. Good. You're going to save some money today. And that's the other thing I probably should mention. I saw this movie for free, and I still don't like this movie. But back to what I was saying. In the end, so how does the movie end? Well, it comes to this big conflict of all the kids from the school versus Morgana and her hell demons. Which is unfortunately something that you're waiting for the entire movie, because it gets spoiled for you in the trailers. Unfortunately. So you have, and you might be wondering, hey, why haven't you really spoken about Merlin a lot in this video? Well, for the most part, besides being exposition diary, there's not really a lot going into him. And they make this big point of, well, the final battle is going to take place on an eclipse. Not quite night, not quite day, so you should be able to fight with us. And that should be really cool. Well, does he? Does our hero fight for us? No. No, he doesn't. Instead, he ends up kind of just flying around the battlefield saying how things are doing good. And then things are doing really, really bad. But other than just being a update parrot, he's not really doing anything. Which is a shame, especially when they made such a big deal about him being primed for combat earlier. It ends up being this type of thing where it's like, oh, I wish we could have done so much more with this character, but instead he just ends up being a waste. And if anything, if you're going to have a magical character, don't have him sit there doing weird-ass hand gestures for 2/3 of your movie, that 2/3 of his screen time, which I will say, it looks like was a lot of fun filming. Don't know why they kept it. It kind of just looks like they were like, hey, we need you to do a hand gesture that seems like it would make sense for an old wizard to do. Can you do that? The kid did it once. He was like, alright, cool. That's what we're keeping. And then he was like, oh, you meant for the movie. I got something completely different for that, but that's what they kept. They kept that first edition. It was like, okay, cool. And it ends up just being distracting of like, what the fuck am I watching when he's doing these hand gestures? At least to me. Can't speak for everyone. So not only do you have all of those problems going on with the character of Merlin, and him end up not really being all that useful or impactful, you then get to the final fight. Well, his big contribution is that he's going to build a portal. And the portal is going to capture Morgana and inevitably lead to the kid's victory. Yay! Except when he starts making this portal and he starts doing portal things, they've already started tying down the dragon to the point where they have about 5 different ropes on Morgana, holding him down with a bunch of different kids, holding this dragon queen down. That the portal doesn't even seem necessary. It seems like something that they were gonna X out entirely. Forgot they had already mentioned it. Didn't want to do a reshoot, and it was like, we'll just add a little flashy whirlpool thing, and we'll be fine. And like I said in the not spoiler part of this video, we know this story. Unfortunately, it's a story that Hollywood has kind of beaten into the ground, and we need better than that if this movie had any chance of being remarkable. And it just doesn't end up being so. There's a couple of visual gags and a couple of jokes here and there that are thrown in, but nothing to really justify this entire movie being made. Unfortunately, it just feels like this movie was a waste of potential when it could have been so much more. And I think that's its greatest weakness. It prioritizes things that don't make sense. ends up telling you much more than it shows. It wastes amazing characters and just kind of does things. And I don't mean it does things that make sense or meaningful or impactful, but it just does things that make no sense. And I guess you could definitely make the argument that, well, they're kids, of course not all of their plans are going to make sense. But when you also spend half the movie being like, no, this is how you fight, and this is strategy, and of course you'd be good at this. You're so-and-so and so-and-so. Well then, when you make these mistakes, at least it felt to me that it's being way too, well, whatever, for really no reason. And the reason why if you're seeing me go soft on it for that moment, it's mainly because I can see the argument of, well, they're kids and the whole story is about him learning to be king and not really being king yet. Which is the only reason why I'm giving this movie any type of credence. Credence? Reluctance? Easy time. In other words, I would just sacrifice it. In the end, it just seems like a bunch of wasted potential. And I wanted more for this movie. Especially since it's a great premise, it's a great idea, and it had Patrick Stewart in the billing. This movie deserved better than it got. But I'm done. I'm done ranting about a kid's movie. And I will see you guys in my next video.